everyone, this is Sarah, the Catholic Homemaker. Today I want to do another book review. This is on Not of This World, A Catholic Guide to Minimalism by Sterling Jackwith. And I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, so I'm sorry if I didn't. So first of all, welcome to all of you who are new to my channel and welcome all who have been here before. I would love for you to subscribe if you haven't already, so we can continue to grow this community. Also hit the thumbs up button if you like this video and consider sharing and commenting below so that more people can see this video. Also hit the notification bell so you know when I post, which is every Monday at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time. So let's get into it. I've been really into minimalism lately, and I just did a whole spring cleaning of my house type of thing and got rid of a bunch of stuff. And my husband and I have been able to do this a number of times over the years while we were single, and then also once we were married too, just because I've moved so many times. And then when we were married, there's been at least maybe 3 moves, maybe more, because when I first was married to him, our first apartment, we just moved 2 apartments down the hall into a bigger apartment together. So that was one move together, and then we moved into our first house too, and then we moved to South Carolina and with my parents. I guess that was a third one technically. And then we moved into our home where we are now. So I guess that's 4 together. So between that and then when I was single, I would move apartments almost every year because the rent would go up where I was. And that was my strategy on, keeping the rent low. And so during those times, I would always naturally get rid of things, but I wasn't naturally a minimalist, I guess, because I guess I didn't really know about it. I wanted to be more that way, but ever since learning about Marie Kondo and the life-changing magic of tidying up, I never read the book, but I heard about her philosophy, and then I saw the series on Netflix, so I know what it's all about. But I love this book, Not of This World, A Catholic Guide to Minimalism, because it's from a Catholic perspective. And the thing I didn't like about Marie Kondo's philosophy or book is that it seemed to be more Buddhism, because one of the things she did in the series was she would bow down at the beginning to the house, thanking the house, and she would have people thank their items as they were getting rid of it. So I'm that was a little strange to me, and items and things don't have a soul in them, so it was just very strange to me to do that. So I just like that it's from a Catholic perspective, and it's realistic for anyone, for people with large families, for homeschooling families, or people who aren't. I mean, it's just from a very realistic perspective, which I really love. And one of the stories I'm going to share with you guys, or part of it, is that she had grandparents, or one of her grandparents, and then her husband had a couple grandparents that were hoarders. So there were hoarders on both sides of their family. And they were pretty awful stories. I think it was from her husband's side. The grandparents that were hoarders, they came from the Great Depression era. And so they were naturally hanging on to things, thinking that there would be hardship times in the future. And they were also doing it for their descendants, for their children or their grandchildren, so that they could leave something nice behind for them. So they had good intentions with it, but unfortunately they had more of a sickness, because this was true hoarding. And she said when both grandparents passed away, they had to clean up the house, and they found in the basement, they weren't allowed to go to the basement, by the way, the grandchildren never really wanted to visit because there was never any room to play. They weren't allowed to go in the basement. I don't think they were allowed to go in the attic either. There were a couple places. So in the basement, they found 12 freezers or refrigerators just that were blocks of ice. When they tried to open, they had to open it with a pry bar. And they spent a very long time trying to clean up the house themselves. I don't know if it was months before they actually hired a private firm, because the job was just so much for them. And the grandparents had a full room full of supplement bottles. And they was just stacked ceiling to floor. And unfortunately, they had to open each supplement bottle and each little envelope and things like that, because they knew that there might be rare coins, because they collected rare coins. And so unfortunately, the private firm discovered that it was going to be way too costly for them to do that. It was more financially better for them to just simply dump it all, to trash everything. And so that's what they ended up doing. It was costing them more to try to go through each individual item and try to find rare coins than for them to actually just dump everything. So that's what they ended up doing. It was like, what do you call them? Like dumpster trucks full of trash, like more than one. It was just dumpster trucks. They had to throw out everything, which is a shame, because like their intention was to help their children and their grandchildren, but it ended up being such a burden for them. So that's really what the purpose of this book is, or one of the purposes is like to not, when you leave this world, to not be a burden on your family. And also while you're in this world, to actually enjoy it, and for your house, for your home to be a peaceful place, and for you to be at peace. And so I love this perspective. Not only embraces minimalism, but it also embraces our Catholic faith as the center of it, and being the primary focus of minimalism. And so that brings me into where she talks about Jesus being the ultimate minimalist. She has a chapter on that, and I agree with that. Jesus traveled a lot, so naturally he only would have a few possessions, and they would probably be practical ones that he needed along the journey. Also, that book review I did recently, The Life of Mary as Seen by the Mystics, it doesn't specifically say that Jesus and Mary were minimalists. It doesn't use that term. Of course not, because it was written in like 1951, so I don't think that term was there in that time. But it talks about Mary constantly giving away things. Like when people would give things to her and Jesus, she would give it right back to the poor, give it right back to people who needed it. And I'm sure Jesus did the same thing. So, you know, they didn't have that worldly attachment to things, which probably every human being on the planet does, whether they're a minimalist or not. So another example she gives in her chapter is the example of sisters in the religious life. And I don't know if it's every order, but my understanding is that when you become a nun, you have to take a vow of poverty, and you basically give away all of your worldly possessions. And so they're just left with the basic things that they would need, like a toothbrush and stuff like that, but they wouldn't have worldly possessions. And even the series that I have watched called The Midwife, even though it's not the Catholic Church, it's the Anglican Church, those nuns are also called to not have worldly possessions either. So not that all of us have to go to that extreme, but it's just a reminder of what God wants us to do and not to be attached to worldly things. So she has guides in there on the types of questions that you should be asking yourself when you're trying to get rid of things. And she has what's called the minimalism test. And there's two different components of it. There's the faith test and there's the life test. And there's all kinds of important questions that she lists out that you might want to ask if you are considering getting rid of things. So it really gets to the root of things, especially with like sentimental items. It's asking you I don't remember specific questions, but it's kind of like getting to the root of your emotions on it and just seeing like, why are you really keeping this item? And if you really still feel attached to it, but you're trying to downsize, one of the minimalist things you can do is take a picture of the item, and then you will be reminded of your memories of that. And you don't have to do that with everything, but just kind of think about what's really important to you. And there's even a section about digital minimalism as well. So that's really all I wanted to touch on this book, but I hope you found it helpful, and let me know in the comments what you think, if you've read it before, and I hope you all have a wonderful week, and God bless you and your families.